We are back with another episode of Fordify, and I want to ask everybody watching this today, what does resilience in business really mean to you? And in order to do that, I've got my good friend and colleague on the speaking circuit for franchising and in the corporate world, Scott Greenberg. He's the next level business. He's just a really smart guy because he focuses on the human side, where I am at strategic marketing. He's about the people. So Scott, welcome to the episode.
Thanks, Ford. I'm so glad to do this with you.
So tell me, I know we talked to the green room a little bit, but what does being resilient really mean to organizations today?
I think that, businesses, whether, it's a small mom and pop or some large organization, everyone wants to go out there and just go to work and just get busy and sell their products and services and implement their systems. That stuff is tangible, right? You want to go out and just, be busy. But there's a human element that is already there because we're not AI, we're not robots, we're not computers. There's a mental, emotional piece there that impacts our work individually and collectively. So individually, there's a mindset. Collectively, there's a culture. And when we get busy, that stuff is the first thing to go. We're not thinking about our individual mindset, and we're not necessarily thinking about the culture. But these things are either an asset to our work or they are a liability. And so when things get tough, as for many industries they are right now, that resilience for the individual and for the organization is really important to make sure that you are fully equipped and fully empowered to continue to work your processes and systems and sell your products and services in those tough conditions.
So conditions get tough, culture fails, right? So everybody talks about culture, mission, vision, and values, and they all have, it's the posters on the wall and they put it on their website, but it's really about how do they individually stay focused on that during times of stress, because everybody's overworked and underpaid. They're trying to do less with more, and I know as we work in the franchise brands, big and small, that they struggle wearing many hats. So what should a organization do, whether you're a franchise brand or a franchisee or just a regular leader in an organization? What should you do to, one, recognize it? And then what are some steps you can do to improve your resilience?
So individually, I think it means taking a moment every now and then to stop and to notice yourself. What state are you in? What are you thinking and what are you feeling? And are those thoughts and feelings elevating your performance or are they bringing you down? And people think, well, then I'm building up to the idea of having a positive attitude. And I don't typically talk about positivity. I think for a lot of people, positivity is a form of denial. A lot of people, and I was talking to one guy who's telling me, business is great. I said, what's it based on? And he said, well, how most businesses close in the first year? It's 18 months and we're still here. The guy was all optimism, but he didn't have data. And so we looked at his profit and loss statement. He was doing terribly. So I don't preach positivity. I don't preach negativity. But what I preach is clarity. Getting yourself to that point where your head is clear, your emotions are in check, and you're making decisions based on logic and based on data. Now, you might be accommodating other people's emotions, but you yourself are in check. So individually, that's important. But then collectively, I think we need to be more mindful about the cultures we build. That's not just about our systems, it's about our relationships. So who are we going to be during the good times, but who are we going to be during the difficult times?
Right.
I have a client coming up where for years they constantly talk about what a great culture we are, how strong we are. Well, now suddenly, because of labor costs and because of cost of goods, they're really kind of struggling as an organization. They're still profitable. Within the industry, they're doing above average, but they haven't faced this. Well, now everybody's blaming this franchisor, the corporate office. So when things get tough, that's when suddenly culture comes into question, but that's when we most need it. So it starts with just more self-awareness, individually and collectively, and then being willing to do the work and have the conversations to make sure that we're coming from a clear place, wanting to make sure that I'm my best and wanting to make sure that my relationships with colleagues are at their best. So individually and collectively, we can go out there and do the work that's got to get done.
Right. And you're more kind than I am. So let's just call it dysfunctional delusional, right? It's because they're making decisions based on emotion, which of course in a buying situation, all decisions are based on emotion and then they justify it logically. But as a leader in an organization, whether you're a franchisor or a franchisee, it's really looking at data-driven decisions and seeing it as it is, not worse than it is, not better than it is, but being able to have data-driven decisions and have the processes in place to be able to do that. So we know how important it is. We know there's some steps that people can take for that. Where else does it, what do you do for an organization that, or what do you suggest an organization does? And we're live right now on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube and Twitter. And if you have any comments, by all means, this is a live broadcast. Just go ahead and enter them into the chat and we'll be answering them live during the episode. And then, of course, this is also the replay for the Business Growth Podcast. So this is also going to be an audio podcast episode. So now we know what I'm doing and we know kind of why it's important for resilience. What would you give? What would you say to a franchisee that maybe is a multi-unit franchisee, and you've been a franchisee as I have? What do you give them when they have people on their team that are more complaining? Now we're not talking about the franchisee-franchisor relationship, which we know is dynamic. We'll talk about that next. But what do you do for a franchisee that has staff, maybe multiple locations, and they know their culture needs help, but they don't know where to start because they're just so busy putting out fires all day that they haven't had a chance to step back. And just like you said, supply chain issues, increased costs, higher turnover, staffing issues, those are all challenges that our franchise brands that we work with deal with. So this is what we call a long road to a tiny house, Scott. All right. So the question is, what should a multi-unit franchisor do to help improve their culture?
So I'm actually working with a multi-unit franchisee right now in Texas who's doing this very thing. Now, honestly, they came to me saying, well, culture is really important. We're expanding fast and we want to make sure that we can scale it. But the fact that they're even asking about culture already puts them ahead of most people, right? So what I suggested, and this is what we're doing, I said first,
sorry.
Yeah, it's an easy crowd. All you have to do is press the button.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. If only I could do that with my live audiences.
That's right.
So what I said was, well, you want to go somewhere beyond where you are right now. So let's just measure where you are right now. And so we have put together a survey where we're asking for open-ended questions, describe the culture, but also close-ended questions, yes or no, or on a scale of, to get a baseline, even getting the ENPS score, right? Would you recommend this job to a friend? And so we're getting a baseline, getting information to find out what is working, what is not working, and what are the areas for improvement. Because, in a culture, unless you're measuring it, it's just like, it's an emotion, just feels like something. It feels great. It feels chaotic. But we want to break that down into something that's a bit more tangible, a bit more measurable. So that is the first thing, I think, to kind of measure it by looking at employee satisfaction, by looking at employees' feelings about management, by looking at retention, and maybe even calculating an employee net promoter score, that kind of thing. And then based on all that data, well, then you can start to set benchmarks and find your opportunities for improvement. But those are some great things to measure. It is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this work environment? Do you feel proud to work here? Do you expect to still be working here 1 year from now?
Excellent.
Those kinds of things. We're also looking at what their employees want most. So we gave them a list of 10 things they get from their job, and we've asked them individually to rank them: salary, room for growth, interesting work, work-life balance. So we're identifying what does their staff actually want. And again, that way they have a better idea of how to motivate them. So to try to break it down forward into tangible, measurable things to get a baseline, and then break it down to what are action steps you can take to improve in those areas. So taking something chaotic and trying to get some control over it.
Perfect. So I'm going to do a little recap then. So for those of you listening, Net Promoter Score was not invented by me or Scott. It's been used for decades, but a lot of brands use it. You're probably familiar with it, where you buy something and then you get a survey that says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it that you'd refer blank, blank, blank to your friends or colleagues? Now, that's the scoring of it, and you can do that with a simple survey. There's all kinds of services you can hire, but it's really in the grading. So a detractor is anybody who grades you from 1 to 6, or from 0 to 6, actually, means that they're probably actively working against you. 7 to 8 means that they'll happily refer you, or an employee would refer someone else to come work for you if they're asked. But you're really looking for those advocates that are at the 9s and 10s, the 8, 9s, and 10s. So if you can score that. So the Net Promoter can be used not only in a sales side where I use it, but also from the culture side for the employee satisfaction, because your employees really are your internal customers. And so you have to start by building that strong culture first. I have a program called Superpower Success. Scott has a best-selling book called The Wealthy Franchisee. It's available on Amazon. If you don't already have it, which you should certainly, if you're in the franchise world, it's a stable that you should definitely have for your success library. So it really comes down to your takeaways are you want to diagnose first and then prescribe. So what Scott's sharing now is that you want to have a benchmark of where you are now. And that's the tough pill to swallow. I know for me, Scott, I've had a lot of different businesses and I used to have some turnover. And I thought, well, I need team building. So I hired a team building expert. And then I need accountability. So I hired an accountability expert. And then it's like, I need culture. And I hired a culture expert. And what it really came down to was leadership. So unfortunately, you and I, as best-selling authors and keynote speakers, we get asked to do programs on leadership, let's say, you and I both. And the problem is the meeting planners don't know the difference between leadership, management, team building, communication, change, and culture. So that's 6 different topics. So, they don't know the difference, but they just know they have a problem. And so the takeaway for the listeners here, whether you're an owner or an executive watching this, is you have to step back and remove the emotional part first, get the data like Scott's talking about, use either a survey or net promoter score, or use assessments, but there's all kinds of companies that do culture assessments and things, but you do need to know where are you now? And then you want to look at where do you want to go? And then you want to look at how to get there. And one of the things that I talk about in my superpower keynote is only quality people, right? Because one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. You can have the best culture in the world, but you have to hire right. And I know that in the franchise world, a lot of times it's their first job and they're minimum wage and they, it's hard to keep them. And then they've got all the other trouble. But what we're really talking about here is what culture really means is building strong relationships with your internal customers first. And then when you have good relationships with your employees, expanding it out to your customers. Does that sound close?
Yeah. And I'd like to drill down even more because a lot of times people say, well, we have a good culture, want to build a good culture. So you know what? We're just going to start buying pizza for our team, or we're going to all buy tickets and go to a baseball game together. They think building culture just means being nice and having fun. And that's kind of part of it. But, the military has extremely strong culture. They call it unit cohesion, where people will kill for each other. They'll die for each other. They call themselves their brothers and sisters in arms. They don't create those relationships by buying everyone pizza and going to a ball game. Like, they're very deliberate about creating that unit cohesion. And it means getting people on the same page philosophically, where they have the same beliefs, the same values, the same mission, and then creating rituals that reinforce those beliefs. And so certainly if what you value is fun, well, then doing fun things together, is important. But what if you value good communication? Well, we need rituals that constantly reinforce that. Organized religions, it's people who have the same set of beliefs, and then they participate in the same rituals that reinforce those beliefs. There's so much more to it than let's just be nice to people.
Right.
So you have to be much more deliberate about understanding what culture is and then taking steps to build it.
And it's ongoing steps. It's not just one at a time. So this is a good point in that program. I'm going to go ahead and this is Scott's book for those of you that don't already have it. It's called The Wealthy Franchisee, Game-Changing Steps to Becoming a Thriving Franchise Superstar by Scott Greenberg. Again, you can check that out. And then while you're there on Amazon, I want you to look at Accelerate, the ultimate guide for marketing and sales. So there's the shameless plugs. We'll get those out of the way just for the episode. And for those of you listening on the podcast, Scott's book is The Wealthy Franchisee, not franchisor, The Wealthy Franchisee. And mine is Accelerate, the ultimate guide for franchisees to maximize local marketing and boost sales. Both of these are available on our websites and also on Amazon. And if you're watching the video, all of our websites are right below the moniker here. Now, in a couple weeks, you're going to be going to the IFA convention, correct?
Yep.
And you're on a panel. What day are you speaking on your panel? Do you know?
I'm speaking on the last day.
Me too.
So, okay, good.
9 a.m. I'm on a panel, 9 a.m. the last day. So hopefully people are still going to be there.
It's in the Pacific Standard Time Zone, so I'm guessing there'll be a lot of people who might be leaving early to head back east. But the people who we really want to get to, the people who really care, going to listen, they're gonna be there for it. So
that's right. So I'm on a panel with some great people from Tropical Smoothie, Great Clips, and another brand, a multi-unit brand. What about you? What's your topic going to be? Ours is going to be on, actually, it's building a franchise culture. So that's kind of interesting that we talked about this. And I'm going to help facilitate that. Which one are you going to be speaking on?
So we are going to be talking about dealing with employee shortages and
Oh,
with supply chain issues. Now, supply chain, that's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but when it comes to employee shortages, it is about better recruiting,
yep,
better retention, better culture ties in. And so I will be speaking on that. There'll also be the CEO of Frios Pops, as well as a high-level franchisee from Great Clips.
that's
It's
right.
going to be a great conversation. We've actually been having meetings preparing for that. There's going to be a lot of good meat, a lot of good takeaways in that conversation.
Yeah. So for those of you, we discovered over this quickly. This is the International Franchise Association up, and the dates that both Scott and I, if you're not going to the conference, if you're in franchising, you're probably going to the conference. And I will be in booth 1116. I have an exhibit. Scott will be at the conference wandering around. So you can certainly, and he can come by and say hi in the booth. And then on the last day, we're speaking March 1st in the morning breakout session. So if you have the app in IFA, you can look up the app and you can mark our 2 sessions. Well, Scott, I really appreciate you sharing some insights today on how to be more resilient. I think it's great takeaways. It's we talked a lot about franchising, but this is about any organization: manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, real estate, B2B, B2C. At the end of the day, it's people to people. When anybody as a marketer always asks me, is it B2C different than B2B? And I'm like, business to consumer or business to business is still people to people. And
It
so at
really
the end of the
is.
day, it's how well you communicate. Any closing thoughts that you have for our guests? I know they know where they can go to learn more, but anything else related to the topic? And I know you're working on a new book, so you're going to want to make sure you mention when that might be coming out. But I know you're still working on the agency or agent and what you're going to do there. Any
Yeah,
closing
hopefully
thoughts?
so hopefully be out by the end of the year. And Ford, I want to thank him. Such an admirer of your work, and your book Accelerate is just awesome.
Thank you.
I did not write about the things you write about because I
No,
just don't have the expertise in that you do. So I hope people will get that. Between that, and the wealthy franchisee, people will be well equipped.
they are.
But it's always such a pleasure. I really just believe that this human side of what we do, it matters. Whether we like it or not, it makes a difference. And so my hope, my mission is to kind of help elevate people so that they can then elevate their business and their work. And I know that you get into a lot of that kind of work too. So that's the main thing, is just to make people more self-aware and know that until they're doing those things, they really don't know what a good opportunity they have with their work. So hopefully elevating the human element will help. And it's always such a pleasure to speak with you, Ford.
Awesome. So everybody, we go live on Fordify. Join us Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and then we're actually live on Twitter too. And so this has been Scott Greenberg on the Fordify Live and the Business Growth Show. That's it for now, everybody. Say thanks, everybody. Or say thanks to you, Scott. All right.